Let's move this closer. Yeah, that's all right. I can turn that down a little, I guess. So we can move that to there. All right. Let's get the hand reviews out of the way. See raise, it's very early in this tournament, so we're going to be defending pretty wide. I flop a gut shot. Player decides to go ahead and bet half pot. Again, this doesn't mean anything, so we just call it. Turn, I pull off an open ender. Goes check, check. This is a very standard spot. Ace on the river. Granted, he could have the ace, and that makes him call, but this is one where we're going to have so many good hands. If you look at this board, 3-4, 8-6, what is it? What else? 6-8. Like, there's a ton of hands here that make straights, plus 9-5, 5-7, the ace deuce, the ace 5. All these cards, like, just the 9 itself being out there, is such a gapper. It's really fun. And I think leaving at this on the river here, even though the ace hit, we're going to win 100%, or not 100, but we're going to win, a very high percentage of the time. Because even when this player has an ace, he can't love it, right? Now, granted, if he had a good ace, I'm not getting a fold. But, I mean, I think a shitty ace can fold here. Ace 3, I think, can fold here, had the gut shot. But for the most part, he's just going to have two big cards. So I don't really worry about this ace coming out. And it kind of makes a bigger statement when you see the ace and then you bet into it anyway. It kind of means you don't really give a shit about it. So we bet and he folds. And I just wanted to throw that in. Now, this betting structure comes up a lot where it's like raise, call, flop hits, you check, they bet, you call, turn goes check, check, and you bet river. That comes up a lot, but texture of the board kind of means a lot when you're in the big blinds. So I think this is a perfect scenario because there's just so much we can have. Pair of jacks. Min raise, get big blind defends. Comes off with a queen on it. I don't really see much reason not to bet. I'm just going to bet standard too because this is one of those ones, if he has a queen, I'm way behind, but if he doesn't, I'm way ahead because he could have an 8 or a 4, and I want him to call with those. So a standard bet is fine of a third pot. I get check raised, which is interesting. And in game, I was kind of like, that's weird to do at these stack sizes because if I have a queen here, I'm just going to rip it. But at the time, in game, I said out loud, I'm like, is he doing this with a gut shot? And after I said it, I called, and the turn comes off, and it's my jack, but it fills that gut shot. So I'm like, well, shit. So I don't really know what's going to happen. He bets the turn for 2/3 pot. Obviously, I'm not folding because I have so many outs, even if he did make the gut shot, and it wasn't my true read. I thought maybe he could have also flopped 2 pair, queen 8, queen 4. I said that on the turn. So obviously, I just called it. River comes off a queen. Now this hand is a complete, ridiculous, weird scenario because originally I thought maybe I was way ahead because he had a gut shot. Then on the turn he would have filled the gut shot, and then I've made a full house on the river. I also thought he could also have 2 pair on the flop, and then I got lucky, hit the jack on the turn, and now he's gotten lucky again and filled up on the river. So this hand went 15 different ways. But of course, now we're obviously never folding because he only beats us with queen jack and queen 8 and queen 4, and he's in the blind so he can have all those combos. But it's never getting a fold out of me here. And this player does jam, and we call, and sure enough, my initial read was correct that he did have just the raw gut shot. And this is the best hand to bluff with. Like the suited gut shot, like if he had the 10-9 of hearts, clubs, or diamonds, it's kind of better just to call that bet and pick up equity on the turn. But when you only have the gut shot, or like running 2 pairs or trips that are good for you, it's kind of better just to check raise that one. So a really great bet by my opponent. If the jack hadn't hit the turn and he keeps betting, it kind of depends. I'm probably going to call again, but then again, he's not going to bet that huge on the turn. He's going to bet about 2/3 pot, and let's say the turn was a 4 or even a king or something like that. I don't think I'm giving it up yet. And then when the river, double pairs the board, it's going to be hard to get me off these jacks just because I'm fully aware of how important it is to be sticky in these situations, especially versus the blinds. Just because the blinds, if the player's a good player, they understand that they do hold power here, and one of their best moves is check raising. So if you can win hands out of the big blind that nobody else wins, you're going to do much better in the long run. Now, what would have happened if the turn comes off like a 6 or a deuce or something totally innocuous? I think a lot of times you're going to see the big blind check. Because now I could just have a queen and he's like, well, I hope I hit my jack. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so I think it's a great case to be made for the way our hands played out versus each other is interesting. Let's see here. Okay, cool. We got a hand we're going to review of somebody who sent it to me after I go through my hands. So we're going to do that in a little bit. I just got permission. So let's see here. We see a limp out of first, which never a good idea. This player min raises to 2 big blinds. I actually misclicked it and accidentally min raised to 3, which is funny because it stopped all the action. Oh no, he min raised to 2 and then I clicked it up because he only had 2.86. Okay, cool. Oh, I remember this hand. This is fun. So this player, got donked off last night over and over. Yeah, it happens, man. What's up, Pocket? How you doing, my man? So, yeah, so we were just putting this player in. This player had limped. Okay. So I go ahead and I bet for protection. And this is all you need to bet. Like, there really isn't much reason to bet more than this because I'm just basically stating that I have a 9. This player calls, and I kind of think, you know what? This is an overpair quite often because the player limp called out of first. He could have 10s, you know, something like that. So I'm going to see what happens on the turn here. Turn comes off a deuce, really nothing. I decide to bet again, just basically protecting and getting value. Then I get min raised. And when this happened in game, I remember sitting there going, really? Really? And it's just like, this is never a bluff. Even though it's super small, it's never a bluff. So I just go ahead and fold. And this guy takes it against this player and hit deuces. So he limped in first, called a raise on the flop, or, you know, called a bet on the flop, hit an exact 2 outer, and I got away from it, I think, for the minimum. So this is one that I was really proud of because I lost the absolute minimum. ACR been super bugging. Hey, what's up, the boss? Yeah, I haven't seen it yet. Hopefully it works out well today because today's a play day. So that was a fun one, losing the minimum. Let's see, got a raise and a call here. I got the overpair, so I go ahead and bet. I'm betting for value. I get raised, and immediately I'm sitting there thinking about it, and I remember it was the pace of this player's bet when he raised me. He's just under 3x my bet. I felt like this is more often a draw than a good hand that he's protecting. So I just went ahead and just jammed it. And he called me, and yeah, he had the pair and the gut shot. And this was a hand that really took me pretty far in the tournament because it was interesting to recognize. I don't really like the way he plays it. Like, why not just call? Like, you know, because if I have anything, I'm going to put you in. Now, granted, in the times when I have ace-king, you're way ahead. But this was a 6-handed tournament. I can literally have anything. And 6-handed, you're never going to fold these 8s in this scenario. I mean, because somebody with any pair is going to 3-bet you on the button, especially with a 30-something big, like, what did he have? 30 blinds after the raise? He would have 3-bet and got all in with 9s. I mean, that's just... So this is one of those ones where 6-handed, these 8s play a lot stronger. And we were even short in the 6-handed. We were only 4-handed, so I'm never folding in this scenario. So not a really great spot for my opponent to raise. This is the last of the tournament hands. Then we have some cash game hands. I see a raise in the small blind. I have queens. And here was a very interesting thing, and I hope it comes up. Let's show the HUD. So, okay. So this player's VPIP was 14 with a preflop raise of 9. That's super low. For most of the tournament, it was even lower than that. Like, way low. Actually, I think these are his numbers. I think these are out of line. Yeah, I think these are his numbers over here. He was like single digits most of the tournament, and I had like 80 hands on him, so it wasn't unreasonable. And when you're in a situation where somebody is that tight, they don't want to get bluffed at all. Like, they hate getting bluffed. And I said out loud, this is the kind of player who will not fold a hand he should for all of his chips right now. So when he raised, I took like 2 seconds, and then I just jammed the queens all in on him. He thought about it forever, and I was sitting there going, yeah, he's going to call me with king queen. He's going to call me with pocket, anythings. This is the kind of guy who's so bad he'll call with ace jack. And as soon as I said it out loud, yay, he called me. I'm such a great player. I'm the best in the world. Oh, there's an ace. But the fact of the matter is, I made a super winning play. We're gonna just crush. You know what I'm saying? It was a great hand, though. It was a great hand, and it was an excellent read of my opponent. Would I have won it just 3-betting? Yeah. Because if I just 3-bet, then he just calls it, the flop comes down, we c-bet, and he folds. But I'm trying to win, all of the chips. So I'm going to do that here 70% of the time. So, all good. Let's see. Let's go over to the cash game hands. I was playing Blitz while... let's see here. Where is it? I was playing Blitz while playing tournaments yesterday. I kind of like doing that now. Let's see. Yeah. A couple of these are just good hands for the video, but there are 4 hands here, and we can go over them. They kind of tell us some stuff. We see a raise. I do decide to 3-bet in this one. I mean, it's 6-handed, and, whatever, we're in the cutoff. I think it's fine. I get 4-bet to 20 big blinds by a pretty big stack. Granted, remember, this is all cash, okay? So these hands play differently. I decided to go ahead and call the ace-jack because I literally can. It cost me about 12 blinds to win 42, 3, 44, right? So I'm getting better than 3-1 right now. And my hand is pretty strong on its own. There's a lot of times he's going to have pairs that I beat. And there's definitely a lot of good opportunities. Flop comes out, we get one of our suit, and nothing really goes on. Opponent goes ahead and bets 16 big blinds. This is not a moment to down bet. If you have an overpair here, you should really be betting for value because a lot of times I'm going to have an overpair. So if you have queens or better, you want to bet big. You know what I'm saying? And if you have queens and I have kings or aces, well, then it's just too bad. But I'm going to have jacks. I'm going to have 10s. I'm going to have 9s. So if you bet 30 blinds here and I jam on you, you can call and get me stuck so hard. And that's kind of a standard thing at 6 max. But he bets super small, which to me tells me not that strong. He calls. I pick up the club draw on the turn. I decide to check. He bets now 3rd pot again. Again, this isn't scary. I decide that this is a perfect moment to go for the check raise, representing a set. I could absolutely have a set of 8s, 4s, 3s here. I could even have 10s very easily. I make the raise, and he just folds. And this is a great hand, and it really illustrates how, even out of position, you still have a ton of moves. So, not a total airball. I mean, I had the backdoor flush draw, which did help with the decision, but at the same time, you got to be able to pull that trigger and make it seem believable. He just didn't show me anything strong. And when you just don't show me anything strong, you're just going to get pummeled, bro. Ace queen off in the small. See a raise. I decided to just call it. I'll do this from time to time because I'm under-repping my hand. I'm trying to induce somebody to bluff at me. And big blind does 3-bet, puts on the squeeze. That's cool. I make the ace. This is pretty much the monster right here. Check, and player bets 1/3 pot. I could have check raised right here and won the pot, but we're trying to win money, so I just call. Club on the turn, it's even better for me. It's kind of a hell of a coincidence if he has a flush right now. I check. He bets half pot now, which is bigger, but still improper. So if he has an ace, he would bet, 2/3 pot here, not half pot. So I decided to just go ahead and call it. And here's the thing. I said it in game. When I call this bet, he's going to jam the river. No matter what the river is, he's going to jam it. And that's true. He set up a pot size bet on the river. He's going to go bet, 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 and I'm going to pick him off. I check. He does jam. I call. And he got unbelievably lucky. Filling a 2-outer on me on the gut shot. The top end only. So it's unlucky, but he's jamming all rivers. So I think this was perfectly played for this situation because, this might as well be a set of aces. You know what I'm saying? It's just as strong in this scenario. So there's no reason to protect anything. I think this hand is fine. I just got super duper duper unlucky. If you want to look at it, on the river versus the deck, we're 82%. Versus this particular betting pattern, I think we're 99. I mean, it's just super unlucky. So I'm happy with how I played that hand. And he is jamming that river no matter what hits. I never have to take an aggressive action to get his whole stack. Flop 2 pair after I raised. I go ahead and bet the pot, or half pot. This is me making a bad bet to build the pot right here. Turns a 6. I decide to go ahead and bet again. 2/3 pot now. See how I'm doing it differently than the other guy? I'm going bet, 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 but I'm making it bigger because I'm trying to get a bigger pot going. Player calls. Make the absolute nutter butter on the end. Player checks. I decide to bet the same 2/3 for value because I really don't know what he can pay me off with. Like, maybe I can get him to bluff if I bet really small, but I don't want to do that. So I'm just trying to get called by like a jack or like maybe a pocket pair of 10s or something. As it turns out, he raises to 40. This is even a small raise. And the funny part about this is, basically he's telling me he has a strong hand. And when somebody tells you that they have a strong hand and you have the nuts, just jam it in. So I jam it in, he snap calls, and obviously we're going to win. And he just has ace-8. I don't know. Here's the thing. The raise isn't, like, why raise me? Because if you think the ace-8 is good, what do I have? I'm not going to call you anyway. You know what I'm saying? So making a small raise, yeah, if you don't want to give me a free showdown and you don't want to show your hand, I could see it. But then when I jam all in on you, why are you calling? Like, so people always ask, what can call you in this spot when you have everything? You know, you have the whole board crushed. Bad player. A bad player can call you. Oh, pocket aces. I think this is just a funny one. I raise, get called. Flop comes off Jack, Queen, Queen. I decide to go ahead and check back, or check it in this scenario, just because I'm either super ahead or super behind. Player bets, just about 2/3 pot. All right. Or half pot, excuse me. Jack on the turn isn't great because it's very unlikely he had a queen on the flop and would bet it, but it's very likely he would have a jack and bet it. He can also have a lot of draws. So I don't really love the jack. I check. Player now bets a little bit better than half pot again. This is like half a blind over half pot. I decide to go ahead and call it, deciding this doesn't really mean much. River's a 3. There is a possibility he could have an ace and go for a bluff, but I'm just trying to determine whether or not I'm good. His last bet kind of told the tale, where this is kind of like a straight value bet. And I think if you have the uber nuts, you just go for it here because I'm going to have an ace a lot. And a lot of players at this stake are going to call for a chop. So I think you should bet bigger. He didn't do that. I decided to just call because there's no point in raising, and he was just uber bluffing. And it's a great way that we got, on this board, you know, we got him to put 30 blinds in the pot with aces, and it's pretty good. And plus, I didn't risk much, you know. I mean, if I lose this one, you know, I lose $3, but, you know, I gave myself a chance to actually win this pot. And here's the thing. If he had the ace, or if he had the queen or jack, I think I would have figured it out. All right. We got a hand here from the Baus. I'm going to load it up. We got the hand replayer. All right. Baus is in there for $1.98. This is probably 1 cent, 2 cent, right? Let's take a look here. All right, you're on the button. You got king, queen. You see a limp. All right, right off the bat, he limped. Your raise is not big enough. You have to compensate for his raise, okay? He raises. Your opening raise should be like 5 cents, right? If it folded to you, you can make it 5 cents. You can make it 6 cents. That's fine. But when you have a limper in, just add in what they did. So if your opening raise is 5, make it 7. You know what I'm saying? You want to make it a little bit more expensive. You're on the button, so that's good. But you want to count their limp into the pot. Honestly, if you just use the pot bet to re-raise, you'd be doing much better. You see a limp, a limp, a limp, and a limp, and you just tap pot, and that's your raise. Cool, that works perfectly fine. But not bad. You do have a very strong hand on the button. All right, he checks. Okay, your C bet's okay. Um, just watch that in the Jonathan Little video. Yeah, 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 exactly. The compensating for the raise. People don't understand because, and you just got to remember, he's already got some money out there. So putting in an extra 3 units versus an extra 5 units is a big difference. Your C bet's okay, and you do have to C bet bigger in turn or in cash versus tournaments. But in all honesty, this is one of those ones where you could check because your king high is going to win often enough, and you'd rather just see the turn. Right now when he calls, you kind of have to give up, and if he takes an aggressive action, I don't like it. If I am going to c bet here, I'm just going to do a range c bet of 1/3 pot, so I'm going to bet like 4 cents here. You know what I'm saying? But it's fine. Sometimes you can muscle people off the pot, make representing an overpair. But you got called, so let's see. Turns a 10. See now here especially, I'm just checking. Okay. Now I like your aggression. Don't get me wrong. I love your aggression, and this is going to work about 50% of the time at these stakes. Just this blind aggression of Hulk smash, the flop is going to work at this level about 50% of the time. The problem is when it works, you're only going to win the 30 cents in the pot, which you're risking a ton. So if it works 50% of the time, you're going to lose about 40% of the money you invest, because when you lose, you're going to lose so much more. So just because it works 50% of the time, it's a losing play because you're going to lose way more money than what you're going to win when this works, when you have nothing and don't get there. Okay? So this is definitely a spot to check because you're going to get huge showdown value with any paint card, and if the jack hits the river, you're going to get just uber paid by 9-8, 7-8, 9-10. There's a lot of hands here. The only thing you really have to worry about is the flush card hitting on the river, the spade, but you have a lot of outs for showdown here. So I definitely like a check here, but let's see what happens. All right, it worked. So cool. So this is one of those ones, but nice. I like that sound effect. But now you see how much you had to risk in order to win that small pot. You know what I'm saying? You profited on that pot 12 cents, and you had to put at risk over 30 cents, which I don't like. So it worked. Cool. And maybe this is one of those players that you just have to bet twice. And if you're going to be betting all the time, you can decrease the size of those bets. You can go a third on the pot, or a third on the flop, 2/3 on the turn, and then the river you're looking to make the big pot size bet. Those are your bet numbers. So it worked. That's cool. I just think a little bit of adjustment would be better. But I would love to see the river there. You know what I'm saying? Like when that flop comes down, you just go check, check. And you're going to be surprised how often in those scenarios, the player out of position, especially at the super micros, you're going to be surprised how often it's just going to get checked down. You know what I'm saying? When it gets checked down, your king high wins a lot and you didn't risk any money. And, you didn't make any money, but you don't really have a hand to make any money. So, it's fine. I just think it's one of those little nuanced things. And I just remember you saying sometimes you got to bet twice. Very true. If you don't know what to do, most of the time you can err on the side of aggression. And I think 50 times a day, I think sometimes you just got to bet twice. Sometimes you just got to bet twice. I think about that sentence constantly because about 2 years ago when that realization hit me, my win rate went through the roof, especially in cash games, because players are now calling the flop much more liberally. And when people have to call 2 betting rounds, they give up easier. And I've adapted that to not just being the flop and the turn, but sometimes it's the flop, then you check the turn and it's a river. Sometimes it's, you check the flop and bet the turn and river. Sometimes it's, you check raise the turn and bet the river. Sometimes you just have to take 2 aggressive actions. So it's true, and it is very powerful, but your bet sizing is risking too much. You know what I'm saying? Because you do have to think about what the person called you with. You know what I'm saying? Now, granted, at the micros, when somebody calls you on the flop, a lot of times they're giving up on the turn. A lot. But because of that, you can just take more shots at it, bet lower. You can just bet a third on the flop and 2/3 on the turn, be done with it. But that's one where you had good, your hand had good showdown value. You know what I'm saying? And in cash games, you have all the time in the world. You don't, it's not like in tournaments where you have a time constraint. But yeah, so you won the hand though. That's kind of what matters in the end. I've had people criticize. It was so fun winning tournaments on stream, and like playing this move and that move, and things are always debatable. People can always say, I think in this spot you could have, and then we'd discuss it, and that'd be cool. But then people would just tell me I was wrong, and in the end, my defense was, well, I won the tournament. It's like you can say I was wrong statistically, but it worked here, and I won the tournament. You always have to give credence to the result, I think. You don't want to be results oriented, but you can be results observant. If something works, you need to observe the fact that it did indeed work. You know what I'm saying? No matter what the reason is. Let's go ahead and get into the master class. So this is the pre-flop section. Let me fix the sound here. Pre-flop section facing a pre-flop raise at 22 to 35 big blinds. This is some of the most fun I have in tournaments is at this part because you're going to be jamming so much. It's so much fun. So I love this section.
Now let's discuss when you are facing a pre-flop raise. This is when one player raises before you and then everyone else folds around to you. So as always, what is our opponent up to? What is their range? What is their strategy? We also want to ask, what is the strategy of the players yet to act? How likely are they going to 3-bet us if we flat call? How many players are likely to see the flop, right? If it's just going to go call behind you, implied odds hands go way up in value. If everyone's just going to fold, implied odds hands go down in value. You also want to ask how the initial raiser will respond to aggression, because if they will fold to a 3-bet a huge chunk of the time, because maybe they're raising, let's say, 40% of hands from the cutoff, which is too much, as you should know by now, and you're on the button, if you 3-bet and they're only going to continue with the top 10% of hands, it means they're folding 75% of the time. In that scenario, you can 3-bet them a ton, and they're just going to fold and give you a lot of pots. So if that's the case, you should be 3-betting a lot. If your opponent's just going to take all 40% of those hands and rip them all in, well, now you should just 3-bet with a straight linear range and then call off accordingly. Always consider your opponent's strategies. Typically from the early positions, when someone raises, they probably have strong ranges, right, as they should. And for that reason, you're going to find that you should be playing pretty tightly in general. You're also going to find that when we look at these charts in just a second, that 3-betting all in becomes optimal with the strong but the non-nut hands. Also, if you do like the 3-bet, and they do 3-bet non-all in, and they do 4-bet you all in, you should pretty much assume they have an effective nut hand, unless they'll just jam basically anything that they think is decent, like pocket 8s, ace-jack suited, maybe even worse hands. You're going to find whenever you do, someone raises early position and then you also 3-bet them and they jam, though, they're going to have a pretty good hand. So let's take a look at the optimal strategy. Let's say under the gun raises and then you are also in early position. As you see, in this situation, we are 3-betting with all the hands we're going to be playing. We're not jamming all in with any of them yet. And that's just because under the gun's range should be really, really strong. If we do 3-bet in this spot, we're going to call it off with Jackson better and ace-king. Ace-queen may actually be a fold against some players. You're essentially using it as a 3-bet with the best blockers. If you think you're against a particularly tight player, maybe you don't even want to 3-bet the ace-queen. Maybe you just fold it. Same thing.
I tend to err on the side of aggression and caution versus an under-the-gun player. So when under the gun opens, the ace-queen off, I'm really only 3-betting it at, the 22 to 35 big blind range. I'm only doing that when I feel like the player is A, way out of line, or B, super not calling a 3-bet ever. Like, so some players have a list of hands. Like, they don't look at a chart. They look at a list. And they go, these are the hands that I play. And it doesn't matter what position of the table they're on, these are the hands they play. And when they're first to act, they raise to get in with those hands. So they're going to raise 10-jack offsuit in the first position, just the same way they're going to raise aces, just the same way they're going to raise pocket 8s, just the same way they're going to raise 5-6 if they like that one. Whatever it is, this 40 to 50 hands is all they're ever playing unless they're in the blind calling a small raise. That's it. So versus those kind of players, and you'll see their numbers will be about, it'll be semi-low. It'll be like 15 VPIP, you know, 10 to 12 God damn it, I can't think of the stat. Raising 10 to 12, and 3-bet will be close to 0 because they're only playing so few hands, and their 3-betting range is literally aces, kings, queens, and ace king. That's it. That's all. So when you see that with those numbers and you have a decent score on a person, then I'm going to 3-bet the ace queen as a bluff because I know that they're only going to 4-bet jam on me with the absolute tip top of that range. Everything else they're going to fold. They're not going to continue with those 5-6s, pocket 8s, 10 jack, things like that. They're just going to fold because I think somewhere in the back of their mind they know they're playing too wide, but they just can't get away from these hands. It's an interesting thing. So versus those players and versus super loose players, I'm 3-betting with ace queen and ace 9 suited. Other than that, it's pretty much straight up for me value 3-bets.
For these other hands here that are being used as bluffs, I think it's absolutely reasonable to just not have a bluffing range against an early position player if you know their range is very, very strong. Also, hands like queens and jacks could be flat calls. Like if you tell me the under the gun player is raising really tightly, you can in turn be tight yourself. However, as we get into the later positions, you're going to find that you get to start to jam with some of the big high equity hands like ace king offsuit, king queen suited here. See the cutoff versus under the gun. Pocket jacks, pocket tens, queen jack suited. Turns out it loves jamming queen jack suited for some reason. Ace king offsuit and queen jack suited when you are on the button against an under the gun raise. As you see, again, still some jams. From the small blind, you're usually going to be jamming a little bit more often because you have essentially the worst position at the table. And from the big blind, you're even jamming some portion of the time when you have this 25 big blind stack. If you are playing a little bit deeper stack, like 30 big blinds, you're going to be jamming less often. So recognize that is a very important key here. We're discussing exactly 25 big blind strategy here, even though I know the section is 22 to 35. This is the one spot where those strategies start to become a little bit different. Whenever you're facing a raiser, you're probably going to play more like you're playing against a 40 big blind player as you're getting closer to like 30 or 35 big blinds. But when you have something like 28 big blinds or less, these strategies are very, very solid.
That's because you have more play post-flop. If you have 35 big blinds and you're in the big blind versus an under-the-gun raiser, you don't really want to jam the jacks or tens because of the simple fact that if you jam 35 big blinds and get called by an under-the-gun raiser, you are pretty much facing a bad situation. At best, you're looking at a race. Nobody's calling there for 35 big blinds with pocket 10s or pocket 8s or pocket 9s. It's just not happening. You're just not going to be in a dominating position. So calling there and going from there like you're looking for a set or trying to determine whether or not the other player has ace king or ace queen, I think is perfectly valid because you do have post-flop playability. They raise, to 2.5 big blinds, let's say 2.5, whatever, and you call it, you still have 32.5 blinds and there's like 7 in the pot, right? And then, if the flop comes out, 9 high and they c-bet 1/3 pot, well, you can either check raise it or you can call, and then, they're going to, c-bet like 2 blinds, maybe 3, so you still have 30 blinds left. And then the turn comes off a 4, and they check. And then the river comes off, and you bet for value, and, maybe you get called by a pair of 10s. Maybe you get called by the ace, king, ace high. But if you get raised, you're beat. And when you bet that river, you're going to bet 7 or 8 blinds. You still have 2 to 25 left. So you have a lot of post-flop playability when you're on a bigger short stack. So there is grades of how you play it. Now, in that same scenario from the big blind, if you're sitting there with 20 blinds and somebody opens under the gun, you have pocket jacks, you're shoving all the goddamn money in because you don't have that post-flop playability. Maybe you can call, see a safe flop where it's 9 high, and then when he c-bets, you can check raise jam. But other than that, you really don't have many moves left because you just don't have enough chips left. At that point. So that's what he's talking about.
So you do still see a lot of flat calling with hands that flop well, right? From all positions. We see the same strategy before where you're just 3-betting very polarized from most positions besides the blinds. You see the big blind getting to defend a lot of hands at this point. Notice that you get to defend wider as your stacks get shallower. previously you were folding a little bit more often when you were facing an early position raise, and that's because you're going to realize your equity worse as your stacks get shallower. Like if you defend with 7-5 offsuit here and you flop middle pair, it's not the greatest hand in the world, but you're going to be playing it some portion of the time.
Because you don't need as much to get in less money. That's basically what we're saying.
As your opponent is raising from later position, as you see, now we're going to start jamming a little bit more often, just across the board, right? As you see, lots and lots of all-ins with the high equity hands that are...
The blue are all in if you can't read it. The red is 3-bet, the blue is all in, the green is call. White isn't in your range because you've already, you're folding it.
Not very premium. You're going to find that the absolute best hands, usually aces, kings, queens, jacks, ace, king, they usually want to be 3-betting for value with the idea that we're going to call it off. 3-betting small for value. And then you get to mix in some bluffs that are very, very polarized. So you see the all-in range is way more linear and condensed, whereas the small 3-betting strategy is going to be the absolute nut hands and then some usually polarized bluffs with blockers or whatnot. That said, you still do get to call a decent amount of the time. I definitely do like calling in tournaments. I probably call a little bit less often than the charts are recommending, like Queen Jack offsuit, King 10 offsuit. Hands like that, I don't think those play particularly well, so I'd be a little bit tighter with those. But I definitely do like calling with these suited, connected, suited high card hands, etc. From the big blind again, as you see, very, very wide calling range. Still jamming with roughly that same strategy. Again, the bluffs are either high equity hands like pocket fours, pocket sevens, etc., or very, very good blocker hands. Okay? Now, facing a late position raise, this is where, again, you can start to get really out of line. I'm going to be discussing a very strong exploitative play in just a second. But
one of my favorite ones.
This is a spot where a lot of players are raising too wide, and then they're going to defend against aggression poorly. So here are the implementable game theory optimal strategies. You see here, lots and lots of jamming, right? Small blind versus cutoff, you're actually jamming 42% of the hands that you are playing, which is a lot, right? Small blind versus button, you're jamming half of the hands that you're playing. And this may come to a surprise, or come as a surprise to a lot of people, because they think with a 25 big blind stack, that's a lot of chips. They can sit here and hang out and see flops. But in reality, the best strategy is to just blast them, because you're going to be out of position and you're against wide ranges. When you're against wide ranges, you'd rather just rip it in, fully realize your equity, and completely negate your opponent's positional advantage. Negating your opponent's positional advantage is very, 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 very valuable. Interestingly enough, big blind versus button, you get to play 85% of your hands. Funny enough, you get to play 85% of your hands if the player on the button plays perfectly. But the player on the button's not going to play perfectly after the flop. So you actually can even consider playing a little bit wider. What's a little bit wider than 85%? Well, 95%. You get to play almost everything. I've looked at hand histories from many of the best players in the world, and a lot of them will be defending with this 20-ish big blind stack against a min raise from the button with about 100% of their hands. Sounds crazy, I know, but the thing is if you get any pair, you can just happily put your money in. And you also have to realize when we're playing here, if someone min raises, you have to put in one more big blind from the big blind into a pot that's going to be 5.5 big blinds total. So you really think you can't realize 18% equity with a shallow stack with any two cards?
This only works on the shallow stack. You're not defending this wide on a big blind stack. I know it seems counterintuitive, but with 80 big blinds, you are going to have run into those reverse implied odds too often to make it worth it to get all your money in. So defending hands like, the 10-5 offsuit, the Queen 10, offsuit, things like that, these hands are going to get you busted too often. But when you only have 20 blinds and you make, the Queen 10 comes out and you make a pair of queens, you kind of just have to get the money in, and you're not risking as much. You don't have as much to lose, so you might as well go for it. So the reverse implied odds kind of don't matter as much because of the actual point you're at in the tournament and what you're risking versus what you're gaining. If you're at 20 big blinds, you're not going at that much further, especially, the blinds are going to go up, and then you're going to be at, 18 or 15 blinds, depending on the stage of the tournament. You know what I'm saying? So it's sometimes just okay to just make a pair, get the money in. You know what I'm saying? Because you need to advance.
Turns out you pretty much can. And that is quite a strong play that a lot of people do not make. A lot of people fold their big blind way too often with these very junky hands. I mean, sit there and ask yourself, honestly, if the cutoff or the button raises, are you really defending the big blind with Jack 5 offsuit, or 8-6 offsuit, or 6-4 offsuit, or 4-3 offsuit? A lot of people just don't. You defend with the 6-2 suited and the Jack 2 suited. These hands may seem very junky, but we're going to be discussing how to play them after the flop later, and you'll see that it's really not that hard.
I will say this is one of the leaks in my game, is not defending the big blind quite wide enough, because I was focused on big stack for so long in tournaments, and not realizing the different stages through. So this is one of the leaks that I still have to this day, where I would say my defending range in the big blind in this scenario on 25 big blinds is probably closer to 70%, somewhere in there. And it doesn't sound low, but it is. I'd like to get close to 80% at the stakes I'm playing right now. Yeah, maybe even more. Maybe this 85 is the move. As you go up in stake, you can actually defend wider because players make more moves from late position. So, their moves are based less on their hand strength. So, it's still a leak I have, and I'm very conscious of it. So this section is very interesting to me right now.
You just make a decent hand and then usually check raise and get your money in the pot. Let's discuss blind versus blind play really fast. So here, the small blind's going to have a very interesting strategy, as we see. It's just open ripping it all in with a few hands, right? Ace 8, pocket 3s, and pocket 2s. It's raising and then calling it off against, with the absolute best hands in most scenarios. It is raising and then folding all these hands kind of in the middle, right? It's limping and then jamming with these good high equity hands, right? This is kind of like the open all-in strategy that we just saw a second ago, or the all-in strategy over a raise. It's limping and then calling all these hands that flop very, very well, limping and then folding the trash. Okay, knowing that, from the big blind, when the small blind limps, what should we do? Well, we should raise very polarized, plus a few blockers, and we should just open rip it in with the high equity hands. You're going to find that these hands that have lots of equity but play kind of poorly post-flop, usually the ace-x offsuit, the ace-x offsuit and the pairs, the small pairs, they very often just prefer to shove it all in. I mean, if you go back to like this chart, look at the hands that are shoving. It's going to be some ace-x offsuits, right? And it's going to be some small medium pairs, and basically all scenarios, right? Look at every single chart. It has small pairs and some ace-x offsuits. So that pattern definitely holds true here. And then you are just raising very polarized, right? Just the best hands up top, and then some blocker bluffs and some total air bluffs. Against a small blind raise, this is when the small blind should have a pretty strong range, right? Now we're calling a ton because we're in position, closing the action. This is, again, presumes a 3.5 big blind raise. If the small blind uses a smaller raise, like a minimum raise, you can defend any two cards. Again, because you're getting that same amazing pot.
Side note, adopting the small blind open when everybody folds to you and you're in the small blind and you open, 3.5. I don't give a fuck what stage of the tournament or what cash game or whatever. I adopted that across the board as my standard open. Now, if I had 15 blinds or less, it's a jam. But at 20 or more, it's 3.5 every fucking time. If you adopt that, I think you're going to see an amazing amount of improvement to your small blind results.
Pot odds, we have to put in one into a 5 big blind total pot. You really think you're not going to realize 20% equity in position with any two cards? I mean, you will. So, in this scenario where, again, facing a small blind raise, we're just jamming the high equity hands that play kind of poorly plus a few of the nut ones, right? Big blind versus small blind limp shove. So, again, take a look at the limp shove. The limp jam range is going to be these hands in gray. Ace, queen, ace, jack, ace 10, ace 2, 7, 6, 5, 4, ace 2 suited. We would have raised, with this entire strategy here, right? We would have raised with this strategy, and then we're calling it off with these hands. You're going to find that as the game becomes essentially just more mathematical, you can really, really clearly make game theory optimal strategies because you basically know what your opponent's doing. And if you're raising with a very polarized range, as this is, your decisions are going to be very easy. What a lot of people do that really complicates the situation is they will just raise very, very linear. Like imagine we raised king 8 suited and king 6 suited and ace 4 suited in this scenario instead of just checking it. And then we did get jammed on. We probably have to fold out this hand that has a lot of equity, and we really don't want to be folding hands that have lots of equity. So we're very happy raising with just these reasonable blockers and then getting out of the way. You may note here, big blind versus small blind limp. If we raise queen jack offsuit, we're supposed to call it off. A little bit loose. Maybe you don't want to raise it. in that scenario because that's a pretty unattractive play. Whenever you are looking at these charts, always ask, like, would this be really dicey? And if it would be really dicey, you should consider playing a slightly different strategy against your particular opponents. That said, again, if you just blindly follow the charts, you're going to be fine. And that certainly does make life way easier. But a lot of money is...
Those adjustments can be made based on your opponent specifically, like what they will do if they err on the side. Like if they have a tendency to limp raise things that you re-raise, maybe you just, check with the queen jack rather than raise it. Or based on the start of this, the stage of the tournament. So like if you're on the bubble and somebody limps the small blind, maybe there are times when you don't want to raise the queen jack because you'd rather see the hand because near the bubble this person can exert a ton of pressure by limp raising you. So it's one of those things where you can adjust versus the player and versus the tournament for a GTO because your game theory optimal will change at different stages of the tournament.
Made by knowing how to adjust to your opponents. And we've discussed how to adjust to your opponents throughout this course so far, and we're going to continue doing it as we move forward.
All right, let's take the quiz here. Under the gun, +1 raises 2 big blinds, 25 big blind stack. Everyone folds 2 in the big blind with 9-7 off. I mean, this is a call from me, but let's go ahead and do it correctly here. So I'm going to bring up the tools section in another window. Tools. GTO preflop charts. 25 big blinds. Our position is the big blind. The action is versus a raise from the opponent's position of under the gun, right? That was what it was? Under the gun +1. Okay. Under the gun +1. 9-7 off. We are calling 100% of the time. That is a simple defense. Very easy to do. Bang. Cutoff raises 2 big blinds. Everyone folds 2 in the big blind with 6-6. I like a jam. I believe it's a jam, but let's go ahead and look it up. So 25 big blinds in the big blind versus a raise from the cutoff, 6-6, is a jam. It's a jam-a-lamb. There's no even raise 3-bet scenarios. We jam from 6s all the way to jacks. All right. Go all in. All right. Low jack, 2 big blinds, 25 big blind stack. Everybody folds to you in the cutoff with 10-8 suited. These are the tough ones because I'd like to play the hand, but the small blind and big blind behind are going to squeeze if I call a lot. So sometimes, depending on the tournament, I will 3-bet here, small, to try and just isolate and get heads up and play moves. But let's see what the chart says. Low jack, and you're in the cutoff. So my position is the cutoff versus a raise from the low jack. 10-8 suited. Okay, it's a call 27% of the time, a fold most of the time. Okay. So it's a fold. Cool. Hijack raises to 4 big blinds. Much different. Folds 2 in the small blind with ace-9 off. I mean, if it's a standard raise, I'm jamming a lot here. But let's see what the chart says here. He's in the hijack. You're in the small blind. I'm in the small blind versus a raise from the hijack. Ace-9 off is a 3-bet 64% of the time and a call 36% of the time. But this is assuming a 2 big blind open. So I think in this exact scenario, I think it's a fold because he raised much larger. I don't think it's a good idea because it costs him less to call, so he's going to call us wider. So I'm going to say it's a fold, yeah. So you can see how the adjustment versus the chart there makes sense based on the bet. You have to remember these GTO charts are based on standardized opening, which at 2.5 big or 25 big blinds, it's a 2 big blind open, 2 to 2.3. You know, when this is at 80 big blinds, you know, then it's a 2.5 to 3 or 2.75 big blind open or 3 big blind open. So when this player throws it out of whack with the bet, we can see that even though this hand is played 100% of the time with a standard open versus a larger than standard open, it just becomes a fold. Interesting. Button raises the 2 big blinds. Everyone folds you in the small blind with queen nine suited. I like a jam here a lot, but I feel like queen nine suited might be one of the cusp ones, so let's look it up. Button, and we're in the small blind. We're in the small blind versus a raise from the button. Queen nine suited. It's a 3-bet. Interesting. It's a 3-bet from the small blind 20% of the time and a call 80% of the time. So it's a call. Yeah, interesting. I don't like calling from the small blind, and at the stakes I play, my general rule is no calling from the small blind. Generally, I don't have a calling range from the small blind at all. It just keeps me really out of trouble. Just in general, because it is a spot where everybody loses the most of the chips that they lose is the small blind. And I think playing lower, people don't realize how, like, I'm trying to think of a hand, if the button raises that I'm calling from the small blind, they're usually trap hands. Like, and it depends, like, usually, like, if there's, like, a guy who's very aggressive in the big blind, here's a good example. That ace-queen hand we went over. Button raised, I was in the small blind with ace-queen offsuit. The big blind had a tendency to raise. So I just called, big blind went for the squeeze, button folded, I called, flopped the ace, and got him to go bet, bet, bet against me, the hand where he got lucky with the 4. And that's a perfect scenario. But that's an exception to the rule. It's not GTO. If I'm going to play that ace-queen in tournament, I'm going to 3-bet. This was a scenario where I had a ton of blinds. If I had 25 blinds there, I'm probably just going to rip the ace-queen, in all honesty. A maniacal cutoff raises to 3 big blinds. You're on the button with ace-9. What's the standard? I'm in the cutoff. Or he's in the cutoff? Who's in the cutoff? Maniacal cutoff. And I'm on the button. So I'm on the button versus a raise from the cutoff. Ace-9 off is a 3-bet 25% of the time and a call 75% of the time. He made it 3 big blinds, which makes it less playable. He is a maniac, which makes it even less playable. I think this one errs on the side of calling because he's not going to fold if we jam. So I think it's a call. I'm not sure about the adjustment because of the 3 big blind raise, but I want to say it's a call. Oh, you go all in. All right, so he's a maniac. So this definition of maniac is not somebody who's calling with their range. It's somebody who's opening too wide, will fold the wrong parts of their range or fold and call the wrong parts of their range. So, okay, so we're going all in because our hand's basic intrinsic value with ace-9 is strong enough. So it was a 3-bet or a call 75% of the time and a 3-bet 25% of the time. The adjustment then is to all in versus a maniac. Interesting. It's hard to say because some people classify a maniac as somebody who never folds, and some classify as a maniac as somebody who raises too often. So I like the term lag, lag or tag or whatever, loose aggressive, tight aggressive, all that shit. Babe, can you do me a favor? Can you grab me in the den on the table there? There's a blue bottle of like licorice chewable things. They're for my stomach. No. They're just, it just says licorice on it. You see them? Yeah. Let's mark it. This is complete. I want to see how long the next section is before we go on. It's a long section, and this portion is pretty deep. Let's see, and we've been going for about an hour. Thank you, Ben. So I think I'm going to go ahead and cut it off here. I think this is good for today. This section is very deep. It's very detailed. I don't know about the all-in there, but what do I know? Yeah, I honestly, though, I like the all-in. I just don't know how he was defining maniac. You know what I'm saying? So if he's defining maniac as somebody who just raises every hand, then yes, you want to jam. So that to me would be a loose aggressive, or what do they call it? Not loose aggressive, but like a loose. I guess it would be loose passive because they're going to raise too often and fold too much. So in those scenarios, when somebody raises too often or opens too often, they're playing too many hands. and then they're going to fold the majority of the time, you want to be jamming those hands like ace nine. And this is where the fun starts for me, where you jam, the king queen, the king jack, the 10-9, things like that, where it's really just takes one blocker in your hand to like put pressure on these people. At 25 blinds, jamming is so powerful from the small and big blind. You're going to be doing it a ton, and it takes you so far in tournaments. It's insane. Yeah, I'm just getting to those terms in the fundamental course. Yeah, that fundamental course is invaluable, man. You're going to want to go through that, feel good about it, complete it, and feel I got it down, and then go through it again. Just start it over. Start it over and do it again, because you're going to need those fundamentals to build on. So this is very, advanced stuff. But at the same time, I think you can definitely glean from it. So if you see a concept that you don't understand fully, you don't have to do it right away. You know what I'm saying? You can just go with the fundamentally sound poker and not make the adjustments until you're comfortable. The story that I always tell is back when I started playing very competitively, and it was paying a lot of bills when I was playing online before I moved to Vegas. I was playing sit and goes mostly, and I swear I did this. I was so confused about how to play ace king that I decided I was never going to play it unless I could play it for all in pre-flop. And so I just started giving up ace king. And now this is back in 2005, remind you. So the game played very differently. So I would open fold ace king if I saw a raise ahead of me and I had like 80 blinds and I knew I couldn't get all the money in. I wouldn't even 3-bet it because I didn't know how to deal with it. I just gave it up for like 6 months. And if you tell that to people, they're like, you're absolutely fucking crazy. That's so stupid. And it was, but the truth of the matter is I increased my win rate when I did that because of my lack of understanding of how the hand worked. Then I spent that 6 months where I didn't play it. I started writing down the hands, the scenarios, and things like that. Started looking for information, started studying it because I was realizing it was such an important hand to play. And after that 6 months, I integrated it back in, and then my win rate went through the fucking roof because now I was this very powerful hand. I actually understood how to deal with it, and that was when I started learning how to c-bet. And you got to remember, back in 2005, the term c-bet wasn't that common. People didn't just blindly bet the flop because of their range and their position and things like that. I need to get the post-flop fundamentals down. I think that's where I'm still lost at. Yeah, that's a very deep topic. You're going to have to work on that one a lot. So I would say you can even go through that section and then go right through it again and again and again and again until you really feel like it's down. And you got to remember, there's thousands of combinations that come out on the flop. Monotone boards, high card, low card boards, double paired boards, things like that. Single card, middle card boards, that have a 9 on them, are a big factor. You're going to have to learn all that shit to really feel comfortable. So don't feel bad about taking your time. And if you don't know what to do as a newer player, fold. People don't get that. People don't understand that. People, as a newer fundamental player, people are like, well, I have a good hand, but I don't really know what to do. You'll see players just call. Call is usually never a good answer to I don't know what to do. When you get into, deeper in tournaments and you understand things a little bit more, you'll understand that when you don't know what to do, you can raise, but you have points behind that to back up. So if you don't know what to do, just fold. Nobody knows what you're folding. Don't be worried about it. Just write it down, think about it for later, study the spot, look at it, but don't be ashamed to just fold a hand you don't know what the fuck you're doing in. Sounds basic, but a lot of people don't do it. Yeah, that's why I asked about the hand last night, because I wasn't sure what to do. Right, but you erred on the side of aggression, which is better. It's much better. But like I said, you could have just checked. Checking is a very powerful option. People don't think you can check when you have a good hand but not the nuts. People think that you just have to always bet something. You don't. Your hand can be powerful on its own, but not improved by the board, and that's a situation where you may want to just check. You know what I'm saying? Would you want to play a big pot with nothing? No. But do you want to show down with a decent hand and maybe win? Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So it's little nuances like that. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up. I got a lot of stuff to do. I am playing today. I'm going to be back around 2:30, and we're going to play a lot of tournaments, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I'll see you guys later. I'm not going to send you to a host. There's a lot of people out there. Spraggy's on right now. That's a good one. So go check him out. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Have a good day. And today's a play day.